The way I approached it was I saw these two hierarchies where you have like this private school, all the ridiculous stuff that comes with it. My own personal negative experiences at private school when I was a kid. I got expelled from public school, ended up at the only English language private school in the area, and I was not a good fit for that. And so I decided to take that and make something good from it and the ridiculousness of the hierarchies and structures that I encountered. And then I was like, what if I took that and then brought in these aliens who have their own hierarchies and structures and made the leader of that group a bit of a doofus who's unwilling to admit that they're wrong and that maybe these kids aren't actually ruling the planet, and then had them collide. And I think when you take these two like rigid structures and mash them together, you can get a lot of comedy out of that, like the sparks that fly from that collision.
Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 474. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed and celebrated freelance writer, Benjamin Hunting.
Hey, Barney, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. We spent the last I don't know 20 minutes or so just talking about Tim Hortons, Alberta Rats, and Beetlejuice. So this has been fun.
It's one of those rare podcast experiences where you live like less than an hour away from each other across an international border, which has never happened before.
No, I can see your house from here. So this is exciting. So you're here to talk a little bit about, you actually have a Kickstarter that is live as of this recording.
That's right.
And you've already met your goal for it.
Yeah, well, in the nebulous world of Kickstarter goals, this is the first time I've ever done a campaign like this before. So Model UN, it's a black and white book, it's manga style, and the campaign is digital only. And all three of those things I've never tried on Kickstarter. So I decided to set a very modest goal that's a little bit below the break even, just to see what kind of audience would be in for that. Because I've had a lot of great support on Kickstarter in the past, but they were mostly with Western style comic books, full color, very different types of projects. And you can't always expect your readers to make the jump to something new. It's a leap of faith that they're going to enjoy it. And I know that there are some creators that I like that I haven't always backed all of their projects. So it's been a nervous week. It's been almost exactly a week that it's been on Kickstarter. We funded in the first, I think, 26 or 27 hours, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
And that took some of the stress away. But you know how it is with crowdfunding. It's always an adventure.
And so, so Model UN. So what first sparked the idea for Model UN mixing aliens and high school diplomacy?
So I was on a hiatus from another project called Dead Air, and the creator I was working with, he had a medical issue and wasn't able to keep working. So I had some time on my hands, and I had these two words, Model UN, kicking around in my head. And at first I thought, what could I do with this? Like, I was leaning towards like a Freaks and Geeks style slice of life comic book where the Model UN Club would be this social center for a bunch of kids in high school, and I would just follow their individual stories. But then I realized that pretty much any manga story involving high school has already been told 10 times better by a million different Japanese masters of the form. So if I wanted to stand out, I had to do something different. So that's where I came up with the idea of bringing in these aliens and kind of, shaking up the box a bit with that.
Okay. I mean, because of that, you literally could have done any type of genre or any type of aesthetic, but how did you land on the manga aesthetic and 90s era for the comic style?
Manga just came about from how I felt once I started working on the narrative for the book. Manga style felt like the most obvious structure to use for it. I'm not a huge manga fan. I'm not super knowledgeable about it, but I do like a lot of the ways it tells stories. And I also wanted this to be a relatively self-contained story. Like, I set myself like a 120 page limit. This is the first half. and I thought I could cram a lot more action into a manga style book than with a Western comic, where it's a little more limiting in terms of how you use the pages, or at least I feel a little more limited by it in my my at my level of making comic books. And I managed to find a great artist, i.e. Santiana Hernandez. He's based in Argentina, and he's been really fantastic at just injecting energy into the book. There's some pages that I'd written that came across as kind of static, and he would come up with amazing suggestions as to how we could add movement or slide a joke in here or maybe an extra panel. And he was constantly providing this feedback. And it's so awesome to collaborate with someone like that who's truly collaborative and truly wanting to present the best possible story. So I really appreciate working with him.
And how did you balance kind of like teen drama with like cosmic stakes?
The way I approached it was I saw these two hierarchies where you have like this private school, all the ridiculous stuff that comes with it. My own personal negative experiences at private school when I was a kid. I got expelled from public school, ended up at the only English language private school in the area, and I was not a good fit for that. And so I decided to take that and make something good from it, and the ridiculousness of the hierarchies and structures that I encountered. And then I was like, what if I took that and then brought in these aliens who have their own hierarchies and structures and made the leader of that group a bit of a doofus who's unwilling to admit that they're wrong and that maybe these kids aren't actually ruling the planet, and then had them collide. And I think when you take these two like rigid structures and mash them together, you can get a lot of comedy out of that, like the sparks that fly from that collision.
Now, talk about the bit of the world building with this. I love hearing stories about how the world building aspect happens. Did any aspect, either like the Earth side of the world building or the school side of things, or like the alien culture side of things, which one did you find more exciting and engaging to flesh out?
I think the school one was more engaging for me because I was really drawing from personal experience. And you had asked earlier about why the 90s. That's when I was in high school, but I also really like that era for how technology is used and how it isn't used, in the sense that, I could make this world where these kids didn't have access to Wikipedia. They didn't have cell phones with them all the time. If they were in a stressful situation, they couldn't easily call for help. They couldn't easily find the answers to whatever they were looking for, kind of stranded on their own. There is an internet, but you're going to have to dial up, and maybe there's one computer in the library kind of thing. And if someone's in trouble, they can't just call for help. And I think a lot about a lot of plot lines from 90s era TV shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a show I loved. And if that had been made today, so many of those plots would have been, oh no, people are in trouble. We can't find Buffy. What do we do? In 2025, you would just call Buffy or you would text Buffy and the show would be over in 10 to 15 minutes. So it offers you a different tool set for telling a story when you go back to that time. And yet it's not primitive in the sense, primitive is a weird word to use. It's not old school enough that there are still computers. So these kids see aliens, and if the aliens hand them a tablet or show them a screen, they're not going to lose their minds, kind of deal. So it's like balancing like how tech can inform a story without today, where I feel like it just permeates every aspect of our lives. And I don't think that's not a great thing, and I don't really want to write in that world. So any chance I get to take a step back from the modern era is nice.
Was there any scenes that you cut because they just kind of felt too over the top or kind of broke the immersion of the story you were telling?
It's funny you should ask that, because I work with this great editor named Kevin Bircher, and I had sent him obviously the entire script, and there was a section of the book that I was really proud of that explained why the aliens came to Earth. And it was a 4-page section, and it had all these fun jokes, and the kids were in a computer room, and I thought it was really cute and great. And he wrote back with this, his notes, and he's like, so I really like the story. He's like, except for this one section, and where you have all this energy and then everything gets sapped out of the story, and we're stuck in this computer room for like 4 pages and it just doesn't go anywhere, and you need to take all of this out. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. He's like, it doesn't matter why the aliens are there. He's like, it just matters that they're there and the kids have to deal with it. They're not going to take a time out to figure out what's going on. They're going to take a time out to deal with the situation. And he's like, you just, this has to go. Like, maybe you can make some references to it later or whatever. And he was right. Like, he was that objective outside perspective that could look at the story and realize that all the wind went out of the sails in these scenes that I was so attached to, and they're gone. They're not in the book at all. And like, the book is better for that, but I had no way of knowing that until editors are great for that reason. You need someone who's whose loyalty is to the work and not to telling you or encouraging you about the work. Those are two really different things. Like, you can have a first reader or friends who are reading your books, and they're gonna want to encourage you and be like, "Hey, I enjoyed this. Like, this is great. That was great." But you also need someone who's going to be like, "Hey, I'm glad that you're doing this, but here's how it can be better." And they have no, they're not there to cheerlead. Those are two important things. You got to have both of them, I think.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. You've had some successful Kickstarters. You've had 5 successful Kickstarters in the past already with Code 45 and also, as you mentioned earlier, Dead Air. What were some of the lessons you learned from those previous Kickstarters that you were able to get this Kickstarter 95% funded within 24 hours?
There are not a lot of parallels because this is the first time I'm going digital only, because right now it's impossible to ship anything across the US border. And that's where 80% of my readership is. So I didn't want to have anyone stuck with an unexpected large customs or tariff bill. And it's just not possible. I mean, you're well aware of how things are changing weekly on that situation. And it's not possible to plan it. And in the past, my Kickstarter rewards were often things like original art or art prints, or we had 3D printed stuff and pins and buttons and all sorts of ephemera that were world building in that way. And I couldn't do any of that this time. And so this is really, it feels like a bare bones Kickstarter, and it also feels a little bit like starting from zero, which is super strange to have it like, I think my first Kickstarter was in 2020. And as you mentioned, like, they've gone very well. We've been very lucky and well supported. But like, I'm doing this dual thing of like digital only plus manga, and the goal is modest, and I'm happy to get the book into the hands of readers and build on that for the second campaign. And who knows, in the future, if things are less chaotic on the tariffs front, it might be possible to do a collected version in print, which I would really like. But I can't, commit to that either way at this time, which is pretty frustrating. But again, challenges make you grow. I've learned a lot doing the manga. Like, it's a totally different way. Well, not totally, but very different way to tell stories. And Santiana Hernandez has been really good about helping me with the visual vocabulary of that, because it is quite different from a traditional comic book, or I guess a Western comic book. It's weird to use the term Western. I feel like I don't have another good term for that, but
what's your approach then to pacing? How do you kind of like do that fast action versus those slower emotional beats when it comes to keeping that rhythm going throughout the story?
I think that's a good question. The pacing for me in this book, I want to do it in 120 pages. And as a result, I realize that when I'm developing character, I have to do it within the narrative. I'm not able to take a time out from the story and delve into the past of a character, or have a flashback, or maybe even an aside where you have characters that are doing something that is not necessarily moving the plot forward. And that was something new for me, because in other books, I did have that space and the ability to do that. So that changed how I managed time in the book, and it changed how the pacing of the book was, because it kind of feels like it's constantly propulsive as a result, because there are not really any breaks. I mean, you're moving from the perspective of the kids in the school, and you move to the perspective of the aliens, and you have the tension of that for the reader. But there's within those worlds, everything that's happening, it's fairly real time. And so you're getting to know the characters as they're responding to what's happening around them, which is an interesting way to develop characters. Because one of the things I enjoyed about writing the story is finding out who the characters were when they were exposed to a stressful event like this. And when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, you don't necessarily present yourself to the world as you feel inside. And in a stressful situation, you can see either the veneer that you're presenting to the world stripped away and you become who you are, or you get pushed back further inside of that, or you discover something about yourself you didn't know at all. and leaders become leaders, and people who thought they were leaders maybe take a step back, and that was a cool way to develop character as well within the tension of the story.
Now, looking at some of your rewards, as I say, you are able to pivot really well on what you can do purely digital. So all of you still have 4 tiers of rewards, but all of them are digital.
Yeah.
That's wow. Uh,
The most interesting one I think for me is the script and the layout, because in addition to the layouts that Santiago Hernandez provided, there's also alternative layouts that didn't make it into the book, because he often had different ideas for pages that he wanted to run by me. And the way we communicated was primarily over email, which is something new for me. Previously, like most of the creators I had worked with, that I knew them personally, so the relationship was more of a one-on-one thing, and we have video calls and phone calls and whatnot. But working more long distance, this was how we did it. So I'm including a lot of those alternative layouts, and then discussing why they weren't selected, because sometimes you can have two really good pages, but you can only put one in the book, and it's tough to decide, well, which one serves the story better, so that's I think the most intriguing rewards tier for me. Whether you want to make a comic book yourself and you haven't done it yet, and you're curious about the process, or whether you just want to see how other people come up with stories and layouts.
right. And people also can get some of your other digital comics as well.
Yeah, I have the Code 45 graphic novel, the first book that came out on Scout Comics after we kickstarted it. I can't recommend anyone put a book out with Scout Comics. It was not a positive experience, and unfortunately, there are a lot of other creators in the same position. Then we have a digital comics mega pack, which is 9 other independent creators who volunteered either full works or first issues or a couple of issues from their stories, and you can get a taste for what they're doing.
This is because your other series that we mentioned too, of like Code 45
Yes.
and Dead Air. You have other series of these. Is we're going to see Model UN as another one of your continuing series?
No, I really think this is a self-contained story. That's
Okay.
how it feels in my head. I've got most of the second half of the book sketched out at this point. I hope to have the second half complete by spring of next year. That's kind of my goal. The first
Hmm.
half right now is done. All the art, all the lettering, it's ready to go. So once the campaign's over and Kickstarter sends those funds over, it goes out the door. This will, fulfillment is always the hardest part of any campaign, except when you're digital only, where I'm just basically going to be clicking mouse buttons, which is such a strange move away from like having 500 packages in my office that I have to lug out to the car and then get them to the depot and that kind of thing. So at least there's that light at the end of the tunnel.
If someone's watching this 3 years from now, and they're like, "Oh, biscuits! I missed the Model UN Kickstarter. There's no way I'm ever going to read this." Well, actually, there is. If somebody is watching this 3 years from now, how can they get their hands on a Model UN comic?
They can go to benjaminhunting.com, or they can still go to modeluncomic.com, because that will always point to where you can find the book. Right now it's pointing to the Kickstarter.
Okay.
But in the future, wherever that book is being sold, that's where you'll find it. And it's the same
Wow.
for my previous
Okay.
books, Code 45 comic, or sorry, code-45.com and deadaircomic.com. They point to where you can get the books, which is currently, I have a shop set up on my website for my freelance writing, where I talk about, cars, music, and comic books, which are most of the beats that I cover.
Yeah, because like I said, you are a freelance writer. You
Yeah.
do articles as well.
Yeah, primarily automotive. Lots of automotive stuff.
Okay. And all that can be found at benjaminhunting.com. And right
Yeah.
there, you'll have like a list of all your comics, Code
Yep,
45.
they each have their own page, and I've got ephemera and whatnot explaining what they do. Those are the some of the outlets that I've worked for in the past.
Right. Perfect. Listen, Benjamin, you're gonna have to come back on when you have another comic coming out.
Sounds
This
good to
is
me.
exciting.
I appreciate you taking the time to have me on, and
Yeah,
it's fun to connect with someone who is essentially local. Like it's,
exactly.
I think a lot of people forget that about community in Canada and the United States. There are towns where the border bisects them, and they share a fire department, and they share libraries, and the regions of the Northeast are like inextricably linked to Quebec, and I grew up in 20 minutes from the U.S. border, and now I live even closer, and these communities are hundreds of years old, right. And families have weaved a web across an international line that's essentially imaginary for all intents and purposes. So it's nice to connect about that.
Yeah, and there's actually that Derby line there actually has to share the same library.
Yep, the Haskell Hill and the Opera House as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Benjamin.
Well, thanks again for having me, and have a great night.
You too.